Time is now 6:30. I'd like to call the May 19th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Finance to order. Would all rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Tom Sinkowitz, Don Cavella.
Yep.
Steve Gorman. Here. Travis Irons. Here. Ted Dumaine. Here. Gary Stalwarn.
Yep.
Matt Brady. Present. Keith Shirley. Here. And we have Dodie and Kelly. All right, acceptance of the minutes from the May 17th, 2021 special meeting.
I move here.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, first item under new business is to discuss and act upon the suspense list provided to us from the tax collector. So everyone should have gotten that. I believe our tax collector is here this evening. Thank you for coming out. Anything you'd like to add?
No, it's basically the same. People I can't find, people that passed away, bankruptcy, people that just refuse. But it's still collectible, just so you all know. I can still collect if they come in the office.
I had one question.
Sure.
I know with motor vehicles, there's so many years before it totally goes off. How about the other stuff?
Oh yeah, 15 years for anybody.
Anybody?
And real estate, motor vehicle,
Okay.
yeah, personal property.
They'll still get tagged on their motor vehicle registrations.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't register a motor vehicle.
Oh,
That's just motor vehicle.
that's just motor vehicle, yeah. Real estate and personal property, it's not like that, yeah.
Okay.
But after 15 years, these get dropped off no matter what they are.
No matter
Personal
what.
property, real estate, or motor vehicle, they get dropped off.
Okay.
Was that suspense list strictly for the past year, or does it go back how many years?
Well, goes back to my grand list 2017. I work every 3 years, so I put most of 16 in, unless I'm collecting.
So the list is a lot bigger than what we're seeing, if you go back 20 years.
Oh yeah, but most of it's already put in suspense.
Okay.
Like 2016's already been put in, now I'm working on 17.
Have you ever collected anything?
Oh yeah, motor vehicle, absolutely. Real estate, we can't put in unless it goes to tax sale, and it's non-collectible. That's the only time we can put real estate in.
Is there anything unique or worth mentioning specifically about this iteration of the report?
Nope, just need you guys to approve it by law.
I motion we send this on its way.
And it's for a total of $105,560.88.
As of right now, yeah, I mean, people could pay between the time I post it.
Question, is that the total for the accounts listed on this document, or is that everything going back?
No, everything just on this document.
All right, so there's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the suspense list provided by the tax collector signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item B, to discuss and act on Board of Selectmen line item transfers. Everyone should have a copy of that. We'll recognize our first selectman. Anything you would like to add on line item transfers?
I think we've discussed this multiple times. I just wanted to make sure if there was any questions from the members so I can, answer specifically to any of those items there. This obviously will not be the last iteration of line item transfers, as we do try and keep it up on a regular basis. There will probably be another one before end of fiscal year. I know on the first week, our first Board of Selectmen meeting, we'll have another one, which should help finalize line item transfers. So this is a rather large one, obviously you can see why. Any questions from the board members?
Where is the line item for the computers, 106218-40?
So what we had done
I didn't
was,
see it in the budget.
should be in there.
Well, it has 621842.
I didn't bring the full list with me. You have the copy of that. If not, may I approach you and see?
Sure.
I'll tell you.
I mean, the only computer I have is...
Yeah, it's a typo.
42.
Yeah, Gary, it's 42.
It is 42, yeah.
1062-1842, and right now budgeted at 125,000.
And what I did
And what was that for?
I spoke to Kyle to make sure that any of the required software that has to be licensed is done at this point, so that the last quarter of the year, fiscal year, is completed. I asked him how much more before the end of the year so I can appropriately put forth the number for transfer, and he told me no more than 15,000 would be underneath that, but just barely. There's no more hardware purchases at this point. Basically, these are, for software and for licensing.
Mr. First Selectman, could you speak to what appears to be the salary line?
Correct. And as we've spoken to the past on this, this was oversight where we should have put in whatever percentage raises for the non-union employees. It went out as zeros, so they did not receive a raise. What this is not a raise. What this is a stipend. So whatever the salary is for the year stays as the salary for the year, and then next year would be increased based on a raise. This is a stipend that would have covered that.
This would be treated as a one-time payment?
Absolutely.
With that dollar amount?
Lump sum deal.
Lump sum, yep.
Lump sum.
Yeah, so I would give my salary as an example. I made 72, didn't get any increase. As of July 1, I voted for in this current budget coming forth, would then be my increase there as a salary increase. This is a stipend, totally different.
And to speak to the union membership, every other employee received a pay increase this
Because
past
they're
year?
in unions. And I can list, if you don't know who they are, I can list who they are, but basically these are the non-union employees.
If the union employees and the individuals
They were
that
scheduled in.
occupy these positions makes up the sum of the list, then that answers my
Yeah.
question.
Other than, that there's part-time people for like recreation, those obviously aren't in here. These are people who work year-round, but did not receive that increase.
Okay. Full-time positions.
And really, the cause of that was because of the circumstances from last year, correct? And going into the freeze. Yeah. But I think some people in the public who might not have been paying attention to last year's budget season, as we know, we didn't get nearly as much participation as we usually. I don't think a lot of them picked up on that.
Right.
And so I think that's why that might be a question for some just out in the public as far as where does this come from or why are we dealing with this now? And that's
To be honestly fair about it, we didn't pick up on it either. Otherwise, we would have caught it and taken care of that before, but that's why it's now.
One additional question, First Selectman, the $90,000 for the recreation supplies.
Yes, I can split that up generically, and we do have our recreation director here, Mark Simmons.
Hello, Mark.
So we have a split in there where we are redoing, because we had monies available, what we're looking to do is to utilize those monies to offset for two basic items. So one is, we're looking to do overlays for resurfacing of the track here, the basketball court here, the basketball court in Warriga, and the basketball court in Moosa. They haven't been done in a long time. They definitely need to have upgrades. That's why you see, if you walk out there right now for the track, you see some areas that were cut out and patched to prepare for that item. They were starting to get some pretty wide cracks in there, and it was dangerous. So this is an opportunity where we have available money the request is for, out of that, probably around 38,000 roughly.
Yes.
And then the remainder of the monies would be for something we've mentioned before, which is we're trying to make sure we do the right thing with the tank, which is outside, and do that properly, so that money, those monies go in there.
When it comes to the line item for Memorial Day flags, is that going to be enough? Because I know we were talking about that the other day, and that flags are supposed to be going out soon, but are we going to have enough?
I was just talking to the Business Association. We're going to continue that conversation. I'm willing to try to find some money somewhere else to be able to come up with the monies needed for that. I know that they just gave their announcement for how much money they had in their bank account, and it seemed rather healthy, so that's why I want to continue that conversation. But we have that, we need to expend that because we over-purchased for Musa, because they always come back to us to say they don't have enough flags for their gravesite services, and that's why we ordered more, just to make sure. So we did a little over this year, that's why the 505. Plus, we always seem to have some that disappear, and we're doing a better job of storing them away so that they don't walk away.
Did we have a bump in any kind of insurance premium, or were?
It was a new claim, our general liability, we had a new claim against the town, so it's deductible.
Any other questions or comments about the line item transfers? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the line item transfers as presented.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries to approve the line item transfers. All right, next item, C, to discuss and act on Board of Education 2% savings fund. So for those of you who were at last month's Board of Finance meeting, if you recall, we had tabled this item to this month. Everybody should have gotten electronically some thoughts that Ken had actually sent over after discussing with the Board of Ed as far as some changes that could be made from the initial policy that we were looking at last month that Kelly had provided for us. So I hope everyone had some time to look at that, and at this time, I'd like to hear any thoughts, comments, questions, discussion.
I'm personally all for just closing the account out myself and going back to the fund balance.
All right, now just as a clarification, Ken, if the board decides to go this the way to word it would be that we would not be in favor of contributing any more to it, correct? But that it would still stay in existence, obviously, for another year until it's completely over. Yeah, okay.
What does the board have to do if the board decides it does not want to continue?
Well, and again, Ken, if you got anything to add, please, but from my understanding, we just need to need to take action tonight to decide what we want to do with the policy. If we don't want to contribute any more to it in the future, as far as the savings go, then that means that once it's out, any leftovers that Board of Education has will go back to the fund balance. It would not go to this 2%, correct?
Right, I'm trying to understand. That doesn't need to be policy, it is the legislation. If every year you make a decision, you decide not to put more money into the fund that is currently established will just continue to deplete as the board uses it. When there's no money, they can't draw from it. The only time the fund can't be dissolved by the Board of Finance, but they can just stop contributing to it at some point, or just limit the amount of contribution, whatever your choice is, yes.
Mr. Chair, we don't have an existing policy regarding this 2%, correct?
No, that was what we were looking into. We were in the process of trying to see if we'd want to put one together, and that's what Ken had some suggestions on since last month's meeting. But we still have to make a decision as far as do we want to contribute more to it.
Well, it seems, I have the state statute in front of me that this is built upon here. And it seems that the Board of Finance does have jurisdiction over either establishing a policy for this or opting not to. It's basically something we exercise. We don't have to in this case. Now, we do have funds from the previous fiscal year deposited into this account that was set up. Kelly, just to confirm, that's in the neighborhood of $658,000
Correct.
in that account currently?
Correct.
So I guess I'm not sure if I understand the full process here as is being laid out for us. To me, it seems that if we're not interested in continuously contributing to this fund, we don't adopt the policy, and really the action would be to decide how best to disperse of the funds currently in the account. And because this is in the Board of Finance's jurisdiction, we could exercise an option to close that account. It's parked in the town's side of the balance. The funds would have to be spent by the Board of Education because that's what they were placed there for. But I don't see where this would be a situation where we would decide to just every year revisit this issue and decide not to do it. If we were to go that route, we would establish the policy. If we foresee this being something we don't want to do in the future, we decline to set up the policy, and the true action is to determine how best to disperse of the funds currently in that account.
Ken, does that make sense, or?
So, I don't know if I fully understand, but right now, so there's an account set up. The only time you'll know whether there's any money even available is when you get an audit in November or December. If you take no action right now, the money that's there will just be expended by the board because you established that account. And if you don't put any money, that's all that'll ever happen. When you get the audit, if you decide that it is valid to put it in to save taxes or whatever, new taxes, that's your choice. I don't know if you need you wanted a policy because you felt that there was public's lack of understanding of what is this money. It's another account. How is it managed? So the question of whether you want a policy to explain the management is one thing. If you don't know if you yet want to consider it in the future, you can do that decision now, and you can do the decision when the audit comes through. It's up to you how you want to move.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when we were initially talking about putting together some type of policy to kind of map it out, that was more looking into it in the long term, if this is going to stay in place. I mean, if we're not going to look at contributing to it, then to me, it seems kind of pointless to go into a really detailed, policy for something that, in the course of the next year or two, will not be contributing to it. It's eventually going to be gone.
I guess that is my point. Is we would only be adopting a policy if we believe there's going to be a potential to put funds into said account. Now, maybe we didn't handle this very cleanly from the onset, transferring funds into an account without having a policy established. I mean, there is a state statute to reference back to, but the statute clearly vests this authority in the Board of Finance or its Board of Selectmen in our absence to set this up. So I guess I'm not a voting member tonight, so this is not my vote to make, nor can I make a motion. But I would have to think that if the opinion of the board is that this isn't something we want to contribute to for various reasons, which we can delve into one way or the other, I don't believe it's not an issue of whether we adopt the policy or not exclusively. We would also have to look at how we're going to handle the funds existing in that account. Mr. Chair, I would look at considering the question in two parts, whether or not we believe a policy will be necessary, and then the second part being how to handle the funds existing in that account.
Ted, I think you had said at one of the previous meetings that you think that because we already have a policy in place for our fund balance, and we've used it's been in place for a long time, and that's what we've used, it makes sense to go back to that.
Yes. I'm just not sure how to word it, but it's my feelings, this should be discontinued. However, for like forever. I'm not just sure how to make a motion to that effect.
The money we have in now already is designated, goes there as planned. I would say discontinue it, because even if they use that money, don't they still have to come back to us to get it?
We don't have a policy in place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, the regulation is no money comes without the Board of Finance
Right.
at least reviewing the request. It should not be unreasonably denied, but it's just, nothing is done without the Board of Finance knowing exactly how the money is being spent.
So we're gonna, just take out, one's almost the same difference.
Of that 658,000 currently in the account, which I believe as a kind of a rider onto the budget that was just passed on Monday, somewhere I think it was $545,000 is planned to be formally requested out of that account for use in the upcoming year. So that, that probably makes up between 80–90% of the existing funds, which is already in the account specifically for the Board of Ed purposes in upcoming years. That would leave them a residual balance of around $200,000 or so, give or take a few grand.
As far as what Mr. Raiden just said, Ken, does that make sense as far as the numbers there, or are you looking at different numbers?
I'm not sure, it's a little hard because it's muffled, and I apologize.
Okay.
I'll repeat what I said. Yeah. To my understanding, as best and current as the information is from our finance director, currently in that account, absent of a policy to be expended for Board of Ed purposes, is $658,000.
Yes.
As a rider onto the budget proposal that was passed on Monday, there's, I believe it was $545,000 that is planned to be formally requested, but that is already implied use for the school budget.
Yes.
That'll leave a remaining $200,000 in that account.
How would it, 548, there's only 650?
My exact numbers, I have 4 written down. I wasn't an honors student.
I just didn't understand where the 200 was coming.
Yeah.
About $100,000, give or take some, left in that account.
But, excuse me, you know that it doesn't exist. The board voted to give that 100,000 to the Board of Finance from that account so that you could offset the pension costs by $100,000, because that was something you felt you needed.
Yeah.
So there's actually only 558 left, because they voted that back to you.
Right, okay. So absent of the exact figures here, my point is there will be some residual funds in that account because there's more in there than what's planned for the usage at this moment for the upcoming fiscal year. I guess that's what I previously tried to get across. I guess my follow-up question would be point to Ted, would be just to clarify your position. You feel that the existing fund balance is probably adequate to serve as any additional needs? We don't need another set-aside account?
Yes, that's exactly how I feel.
Okay.
And I think what we've got now is, it's not, what they say, it's not broke.
As I understand it, the current process is any unexpended funds at the end of the year would be returned to the town and put into the general fund, correct? And there are processes, either by the town charter or additional bylaws or policies, where the Board of Ed, if need be, could make requests for funding to bring to the Board of Finance in a very similar, if not the exact same fashion, that making a formal request out of a 2% set-aside account might be. So it seems like a duplicate effort to me.
The big difference is, there's a maximum you can get out of the fund balance before you go to the general public. In this case, he can take whatever's in there, the maximum, about $700,000. If it's approved by the Board of Finance, we don't have to go to the public. Right now, to get money out of the fund balance, I believe $50,000 is the limit. We're going way over that limit. And I don't think that's in the best interest of the taxpayer not to have that vote.
Ken, did you have something?
Well, the only clarification is that, so the Board of Finance and the Selectmen asked to try to keep the budget to flat, so there will be no tax impact. And we achieved that. And we achieved it by putting one-time costs, such as technology, such as some staff that have to come because of the COVID or reducing. And we put $500,000, and we justified why those costs would only be a one-year, one-time cost. If the 2% set aside were not there, and even if we came back for $50,000 from the fund balance, you must raise the appropriation of the school. You don't need to go to the public for $50,000. You would need to go for $150,000 or $200,000. You would raise the MBR and raise the appropriation. Under a 2% set aside, it is not an increase to the appropriation. It is a cost offset. And the Board of Finance can stipulate from the beginning that you don't want more than $250,000 put into that account because you'd like to limit the amount of money that is spent on one-time costs. I know I sound like I'm trying to explain to you why you might want to do it. That's just the reality is a 2% set aside takes money that the taxpayers gave you for schools that was underexpended and saves it for schools in the future without raising the MBR. It just allows it to be used for one-time costs that the Board of Finance manages and suggests. You would say to us, I don't think that's a one-time cost. If you put that in, we won't put future monies there. You have the controls of how much you want to put in every single year, never changing the MBR, and basically helping keeping a tax rate down by putting one-time costs on something that the public paid for already. So if we save $500,000 this year that the taxpayers paid, and you put it into the fund balance, next year when you ask us to fund the schools, if we need $500,000, they would have to raise the taxes, or you'd have to go to the fund balance, and either way you'd change the MBR. I thought that part was that the Board of Finance would find as a positive, because you literally control every dollar that goes into it, and you can set limits if you want, and you virtually tell the taxpayers that if they paid it once, they don't have to pay it a second time, and you're never changing the MBR. That's why the language that we tried to adjust for you gave you all the power you wanted without putting limits. Instead of saying you shall put money in, it says you may. And instead of saying you will disband the account because you can choose not to fund it. But I don't know if that helps clarify for you.
Maybe keep the account open and use whatever's in there, and then not put any money in there.
Right. If you don't want to put money in, you don't. You have that control already. I don't know why you would take a choice before you even know if more money is available after the audit if you wanted to put money in. But that's a choice you make.
Leave something in there so it's not totally closed. Leave something in there so it's not totally closed, and, you know, so we can always add to it.
Correct. You can leave a dollar.
Whenever in the future.
Yep.
You say the taxpayer has already appropriated this money, okay? Does that then mean, because the taxpayer did look at each line item, that anything you took out would be put into that line item? Or can you put it any way you want?
So we don't put any money in. The taxpayers gave us the budget and said, this is what we're going to spend it on.
By line item.
By line, well, they voted and they saw the budget that you showed them. That's been provided publicly at your meeting, at our meeting, and at the town meeting. When they voted, they said $35.9 million. We believe we're going to spend $35 million. There might be $900,000 at the end of it. If it's over $700,000, $200,000 is going to go in the fund balance. If you want money for the ECS, if it's underfunded, you can take that money long before you decide if you want to have money put into the account. Whatever monies the Board of Finance chooses to put into that account, if you choose to, that is money that the taxpayers paid this year we didn't need to spend, and in the future you could say now you can fix the trap, which we're going to do. Now you can remove asbestos, because you have a set-aside account only for one-time costs, not recursive, because that's a structural deficit. So the money is not put in, Ted, the money is not put in by the board into the account. The money just is the end of the audit saying you have about $400,000 left over. What would you like to do? You might say put $200,000 in the board account and put $200,000 in the fund balance. That's completely your discretion. After you put it there, the board has to come to you for every dollar they want to spend. And it doesn't change the MBR.
And that's why I brought up before, you know, the other meetings, that the money's already been approved by the taxpayer. To me, it should have been under the revenue side of your budget, which would have taken the money out of the taxpayers' burden at the bottom. It would have reduced that on the budget that was just passed, but you didn't do that.
And again, we did, but if
No,
you
you
put in,
didn't.
I understand, and I know that there was a better way maybe to represent it. In the budget, 35.9 million, if we put in 36.5 and then subtracted it out because it was going to be a revenue, the appropriation would have been 36.5, and then the revenue would have been subtracted. But the appropriation, as far as the state is concerned, is 36.5. We tried to protect the town by saying, we're not spending 36.5, we're spending 35.9. But to your credit, what could have happened is all the names of the people that we needed to add could have been put under the side of expenditure with a 0, noting it was coming from the 2%. I think you would have liked to see what is being spent, and I think it could have been done differently. You know, in terms of showing we need 6 teachers to keep the numbers under 18 so that the students can be distanced and safe. We need a track, we need the technology in order to make sure kids can learn under remote. We could have put it in there, but then put a 0 and left the no 2% set aside. Because it wasn't there, you were concerned that the appropriation didn't account for those expenses, right? I think. But if we added it in, the appropriation requires that if that money is not there in the future, you would still owe us $36.5 million. I don't know if I made that clear. We didn't want your MBR to be a requirement when the money annually could change. So we put it in a separate account the way the law allowed.
Mr. Chair, I've heard it mentioned a couple times now that as partial justification for the 2% set aside account and accompanying policy, defending a low tax rate. And I think we're probably starting a few steps too far down this path. We're missing some of the initial steps here. Whatever the reason or causes may be along the course of a fiscal year, having under-expended lines on the budget means that the tax rate was too high to begin with, right? So those funds were, in this case over the last 2 years, we've had a pandemic happen. I don't think any of us had that in our crystal ball trying to forecast what the financial needs were going to be for the town and from the taxpayer. But we set that tax rate, that mill rate, annually, right? That is our opportunity every year over a 3 or 4 month process to look at the lines historically, look at what's going on in the town, try to adjust those figures for where they ought to be for the upcoming year based on what we know and what we anticipate going forward. And a consistent failure to take into account any of these dynamics, whether it's fair or unfair to pin to certain events that are driving either revenue shortfalls or not needing to spend the funds from the taxpayer, we still overtaxed the citizens. And we have this annual process already set up to make sure that we get that mill rate as low as we can every year. Or if we need to make a presentation to the public to approve a mill rate increase, that we have the members of the departments or the members of the school board coming out to the public and arguing that case, right? We have the budget workshops. So that's a very important step right at the onset of this every year that happens. And I don't want that to be devalued or ignored as part of this process. And as far as the, trying to defend the MBR, like it is true, I will concede that point, that having that fund available, being able to sidestep the appropriation component of what your MBR is set at, can be a short-term convenient fix. But I think we really need to be looking a lot longer down the road, further down the road, and at the much bigger picture here. All things considered, the fund balance as it is right now, unreserved, is about 3/4 of our annual operating budget. That's huge. And we know that from the audits that we've had over the last few years. And we have policies that we can revisit, and I'm sure that the board will probably find it in its interest to do so, given this discussion and where the mill rate is currently and all the elaborate steps we've taken to try to keep it flat in the current climate. But we really need to focus on all of the steps involved here, and not just what might be a convenient side to developing one part of the overall town budget here. It's, the very fact, again, I'll go back to that initial point, that we have this many dollars in the account that are underexpended, means we've had taxes probably too high. And when you look at the size of our existing, that both the school and the town has contributed to from underexpended lines over the last how many years? We've consistently overtaxed the people in this town. You don't get to that fund balance total by winning the lottery.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if I may. I'd like to defend the way the school budget has been underrun. As you know, we do have the MBR requirements that we have to meet. The only reason why we have these significant underruns last year and this year is because of the pandemic. We underrun in transportation. We didn't have teachers that we needed in place. There's a whole slew of reasons that were specifically COVID related. This isn't going to happen in the future. And Mr. Radon, to go back to one of your comments where you said in the past how these underruns have been there, I can tell you that since I've been here for roughly 10 or 12 years, we underrun by $3,000 against $36 million. We don't have the $500,000 underruns like we've been having. So to have this 2% set-aside account set up for these 2 years that we're in now is going to be a huge advantage to the taxpayer. And we don't have these underruns in the future anyways. So I think it would be in the best interest of the town to allow us to have the 2% set-aside set up. And as Mr. Cabela stated, have dollars put in there just to have something available if you don't want to go the full amount. But this is an anomaly. We have 2 years of very special circumstances. I don't think we're going to see this again.
Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify real quick. I apologize if it came across as my comments were specifically targeting underruns on the school side. I think what my point might have been was the fund balance in general. Due to its size, there have been consistent underruns as a whole as part of the town. Whether the school has contributed a larger share of that or a smaller share, I know that in my couple of years on the board, the percentage is very tiny. It came on in very close. And true, largely COVID-related underruns at play here.
Well, sometimes the money going into the fund balance is like revenue. Like this year, we have Amazon. We have a big check coming in that we didn't budget because we didn't anticipate this. So that goes into the fund balance. That helps it grow.
And if I could do one thing that may help the board a little bit, from today, you're not putting one more penny in any 2% set aside. You're not going to do anything until December when you have an audit. You have between now and the next 6 months to even think about. I know you wanted to explain to the public, which I get, but also, did you notice that what we did is when we gave the public information, we didn't say we just have money. We listed every single dollar that the $549,000 is really going for. I just think that what you have right now, you already have an agreement that you put the money aside. That money's there. You're not going to put another penny into the account because you won't even know what's left over or what the audit said. So you have about 6 months to think about whether the policy has to be not to do it or whether it has to have exclusions. I think you did some very good work on trying to create the language, and we tried to help and even strengthen your language. But I think that if you're still concerned about the impact and the public and the use of it and any compromise to the charter, I think to just wait and see what happens and what the auditors say and where we are, I think you may be able to make a better decision. When you get closer to the time, you have to even think about it. If you don't put a penny, you don't even have to have policy. This is going away. And you can't put any money in until you get an audit and you know exactly how much money is left. I don't know if you have to decide today to tell the public you won't or you will or whatever. I think you have time.
In 6 months, we're going to be in the same place we are right now. At least myself, I don't understand this. I think I need a lawyer to help me out. Quite frankly, there's no way in God's good earth that I could put this in legalese. Not even attempt to it. And I don't think that's going to change in 6 months from now. So, my opinion, what I'd like to see is, let's just forget about the whole thing. Or we can revisit it again in 6 months. But I'm not so sure we're going to be anywhere further ahead in 6 months and how this should all be worded.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I'm curious of your thoughts on this policy that we've been spending
Yeah.
quite a bit of time on.
So, I mean, I certainly understand where the Board of Education is coming from. I completely recognize the fact that Mr. Lucier made that this is some unprecedented times, and the amount of money that was contributed to that account will probably be never to be seen again. I do respect Mr. DePietro's point that perhaps action doesn't need to be taken tonight. You know, as a relatively soon-to-be departed member of the Board of Finance, I don't feel entirely appropriate to say, yeah, table it and worry about it later, because I won't be here. But I do agree. I think perhaps the wait-and-see approach may be the most appropriate action. It is my feeling on this right now.
Dean?
Taking all of this in, I do have a couple of questions, and anybody that can answer them for me would be great. Right now, that set-aside account has $658,000. And you kind of earmarked $500,000 on it.
Correct.
All right, which leaves about $120,000, which you in turn are putting back into the general fund. Is that correct?
100,000 of it, yes.
100,000. So that's going to leave you with maybe 15,000, 20,000 left in that account.
Yes.
All right. The question now becomes, for me, right now that 500,000 is part of your budget. Are you going to decrease your budget by 500,000 next year?
So,
Since these are one-time costs in that set aside, that you're earmarked in that set aside.
so let me be as clear as I can. For the last 3 years, our budget has been $35.9 million. It was $35.9 million last year and the year before. And next year coming, it's $35.9 million. So we did not go up $500,000. Now, there is $500,000. The items in there were defined as the reason why you need another 7th grade teacher is because we have kids coming in from home and everything else, and we need to get the class size down to 16. But the following year, you don't need the teacher. That's gone. We need another 8th grade teacher. Those are going to the high school. You don't need it. We need extra teachers in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade because we have children who are not meeting the same expectations. We needed a track fix. So the 500,000 is not only not going to be needed, those things will actually go away because once the asbestos is done and the track is done, it is not added. So we're not reducing the 35.9. We haven't had a lot of money past the 35.
So basically, this is just something you didn't count on, but you have.
So we've known we need, right, this happened because of the pandemic and it happened because we've had some things we were not able to do. And that way, we made sure it would not be a structural deficit. We don't have to reduce it, we don't have to add it. The budget has stayed flat for 3 years. It starts at the same point, 35.9. It doesn't start at 36 because we spent money, but we really didn't tell anybody. We showed the public, we're spending this money. It's a one-time cost. We can show each one why it is only one time.
And you're using the reserve fund just to take care of that one-time cost.
And we are, and we don't get to spend it. Remember, all we do is we ask the Board of Finance and the town to pay for that cost, because it doesn't add into our budget at all. It's paid on the town side, and that's it. So the money never comes into our budget, never goes out of our budget, and it's paid to them.
Do you foresee any significant changes in the future in how your budget is going to unfold?
Yes.
Can you project?
I can. There's going to be 2 amazingly dynamic things that are going to happen. I'm glad you asked the question because the public would be appreciative of this. So, first of all, what we know will happen is our budget is going to basically come in pretty flat because what we see is there's been an attrition of the numbers of students at the high school from about 700 down to about 600, and that's staying flat for the next 3 years. So the only thing that affects it is going to be rises in wages. And if you know, because we just approved this, all of the teachers' union, the largest union, approved going from a PPO to an HSA, and the net savings of that more than exceeds the request they asked for in 2 years. The teachers' cost to us, which is $13 million, will basically be flat between the cost for their wages and the cost for their benefits. That we presented. So we know that's pretty flat. The dynamic is, in addition to that, the federal government is giving us $3.2 million over the next 3 years. And so anything we have relative to emergency need is going to also be offset. So you're going to have an amazing threshold of funds that are going to come to you that are going to support the crisis. So in essence, any money you put in a 2% set aside may or may not be needed, and that's a decision you can make when you see the audit. But yes, you will be seeing, we already have 1.5 million in our hands. That's called the ESSER 2 money, and we're getting 3.2 million that has to be expended by the year 2024. We have 3 years, this year, next year, and the next year. And that's going to be split over the 3 years. I think this town is going to see support for education in a way we've not seen it before. And the only thing you don't want to do is look like you're cutting the budget against the federal government. That would be challenging. If they give you $3 million, you wouldn't want to drop the budget, that's all. And I honestly, I'm not going to be, I'm not trying to prove something for you, for me. I just want you to know that's exactly what will happen.
I think this is probably, when the next audit comes up, and they've already allocated what they're going to do, they're probably not going to have much in that 2% fund anyway, and I don't think there's really going to be a need for a policy if any reserves is automatically put back into the township. Any under expenditures.
Right, it's still going to be up to the board to need to make that official motion. Like Ted was saying, whether we did it tonight or whether we did it, 6 months from now, we still have to decide if there's going to be no more money contributed to that account. Now, based on, listening to the members, we could do the, again, the wait and not necessarily take the action tonight, but I do agree with Ted, is that I don't think, as far as things changing drastically between now and then, I think we'll still consider everything that was just discussed now. This is a very unique situation. It's not going to continue to happen in the future, having this much money left over, and we have our fund balance policy already in place that we can resort to in the future if the situation arises. So what action would the board members recommend taking?
As I've stated, I just don't know how to make the motion, but I can say it bluntly, disband it. How do I make the motion? What are the proper words?
Mr. Chair, I am not an expert parliamentarian, but I don't believe that motions to the negative are typically are frequent. So I believe that the options would be either to indefinitely postpone or to postpone to a set date, either discussion or action.
Kylie, what are your thoughts based on, we know our time frame, of course, with the audit, and kind of thinking on a timeline of when the board should probably act on this. The goal was to try to act on it last month or this month. That was just kind of trying to look ahead, but if we were to wait till a later time, would there be a recommendation? Sort of when we should finally make a decision?
If the account obviously is going to stay open, I think you need a policy so you know how it's going to be. Like, in my mind, if the town's going to have the money and we're going to cut the checks, we can't sign those. We're not going to be following the town policy. They're going to have to sign them because it's a Board of Ed, how they spend it. They have different thresholds and everything than what we do. So it's not like we're going to cut the checks down here for the education and sign them. So that's an issue on our side. Now, the time, if you want to wait and see what is going to be left and decide what you want to do at that point, the audit hopefully will be done by December 31st, but I can't tell you that 100%, So, I don't know what what they have right now as potential growth, what's going to be left over at the end of the budget. I don't know.
It's still going to come down to we have to have a policy.
Yes, if you're going to keep this open, I would advise that to look as if you have rules in order of the transparency of the money.
So we can table looking at a policy now and do it later. But it seems to me we've already done that, and we've all read it. And I don't know how many of us thoroughly understand
if, in the absence of maintaining the account declining a policy, would a motion be to the nature of closing the account upon exhaustion of the funds in said account? As those funds are either way earmarked for Board of Ed use. That ship already sailed almost a year ago. So those funds are rightfully to be expended by the Board of Ed at this point. But the account itself can still be closed upon its depletion. Would that be a suitable motion?
Let me make an observation on that. The board has the right to keep that open forever.
That's another possibility too.
So we may never close it.
Yeah, but then we probably won't have that much money in there, just keep a little bit in there just in case you want to go back and use it, or, contribute again in the future.
You still have a fund balance.
And then we go back around again to say that if it's going to be in existence indefinitely, we need a policy for it. You know, so.
And that way, again, like, we won't have to worry about the MBR when they want to come in for another $100,000, that will raise that number.
There's other dynamics that can affect where that MBR gets set too. As far as enrollment in the district and a few other components that I couldn't delve into great detail now. I'm sure the superintendent, Mr. Lucier, could probably speak to that. I would think that it falls down to two options. Either keep the account and you need the policy adoption, or if you don't want the account, then you decide to close the account in absence of policy. And that would just leave the issue of the funds in.
Ken, yeah.
If I can, in the policy that you drafted, and I just edited a bit for you, the policy, when you read it, says the Board of Finance exclusively has the authority to discontinue contributions to the fund. That language is right in there. If you adopt the policy as amended, you cannot use language that says, we're going to disband the fund. That language is contrary to the law. Once you have the account, you can't disband it. The board can only just expend it and then let it run out. You can't close it because it has $50 and you think it's a waste of time. It doesn't allow for it. So it gives you the power in the policy that you wrote, all I edited, saying that you have exclusively the authority to decide how much you want to put in and to not. With that, you don't have to have another policy meeting. On November, you can just say, we're not going to put money in it, and it's over. There's no more money. You can say, we want to put money, and it can go on. You actually have a policy that tells us, the public what the money is used for. It's used by the schools. It is only money that's left over after an audit that you can pre-decide before you put any money in it. If you are short, and you wrote it, if you are short ECS, you will want to address that before you put money. You have great language that you develop in your policy. The only two things we had to exclude is you can't disband it. You cannot discontinue it because you established it and that's not allowed by law. It's like taking money away from the school board and from parents and children. You can't. But you just don't have to fund it. And that language is very clear. Exclusively the authority of the Board of Finance to determine if they want to discontinue contribution. So if you adopt the policy at any point, November, December, January, whatever, you just can stop putting money in it. You don't have to worry about that this fund can run away or that it can be misused. It can't. I think.
Mr. Chair, we have an account, but we don't have a policy. Unless we have a legal opinion on our inability to close an account that is within our jurisdiction, I don't understand that argument. Because this account is under the purview of the Board of Finance. The expenditures out of it are authorized by the Board of Ed. But upon a zero balance, I don't understand where the problem with closing that account as one of the actions under the purview of the Board of Finance would be.
I guess for me to piggyback on that, my question to you, Ken, since you have an understanding, is who does have the authority or who would discontinue it if that's the recommendation the Board of Finance wanted to see? You were saying we don't have the authority to just discontinue and get rid of it, but how can that happen?
Well, when we came to the last meeting, we asked if we could research it. We went to Ship and Goodwin. We asked them to do a research on the law. They gave us the thing. They gave us the statements, which is why I wrote based on their thing. I can certainly provide that to you so you can look at their ruling or have your own lawyer. But they said under the law, the Board of Finance cannot take an action to discontinue. All that can be done is when it's exhausted, there is no fund left. It's just not there. And at that point, it becomes defunct. You can't in advance decide it's going to be done by June 30th, 2022. And we only tried to write what was that legal opinion. And then what I said to you is, this is for your review. If you don't like it, if you want to have your lawyers look at it. I just didn't want you caught in something where you put a policy that violates, some aspect of the law. So I did my best, but certainly you can ask your legal counsel to say, is this accurate?
So basically, if we spend that all the way down to zero, it just kind of...
Right, it closes itself because there's no money in it.
So we don't have to close it.
Do you have a revolving construction account, for example? You have something in construction that revolving that you, in case you don't have one like that? I thought you had established that a few years back so that you wouldn't have to go back to the taxpayers on a rainy day or an emergency, but that's okay. I thought there already were some revolving. This would then be a little different. It exists, but...
I think it would be in the benefit of the Board of Finance to see the legal opinion. That doesn't make too much sense to me, but I'm not a lawyer. But
I'm trying to figure out how to get around that.
I don't see how that makes very much sense. I mean, I'm sure the lawyers are paid for a good reason, but I think it would probably be to the board's benefit if we had at least one thorough legal opinion on that. Because I don't think it would be a good idea to have an account sitting at zero if the board was to perpetually decide not to contribute to it either.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I think what the law is trying to do here by not having the Board of Finance have the ability to close it out is to protect the Board of Ed money that is in that account specifically for the Board of Education. Let's say we have a $500,000 account and we draw it down to $100,000. I think the law is being written in such a way that says you can't now all of a sudden say, we're going to close that account and take that money. Because the law states it's specifically for the Board of Education.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are given the right to close the account at any time, that's in violation of what the law is saying the account is set up for. So in other words, if the money is in there, draw it down to zero, and just let it go.
It's over.
And then you have the zero balance account sitting on the books forever. I guess that's...
It'd be like a simple savings account at the bank. You draw everything out of your savings account, it goes down to zero, that the account automatically closes for you.
No, not on the town. We get charged fees for that if you have no money in there. So you'll be paying money for a zero bank account.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think that would, given that point of information, I think that would bolster the need to have that legal opinion that we can't, in fact, close an account we opened up after expending all funds to the appropriate party.
I'll just keep $1 in there and that, that, well, you know.
The fee is like $25.
I know, but just keep $1 in there or whatever.
Yeah, $25.
Illegal. The reason is because the Board of Finance can't take it. If the board only ever took out everything but $1, it just would never close. You can't force the board to take the money out. They're not going to do that to you. We have a great relationship.
Right, but
If they don't take it out, it's going to sit there. So you may want a legal opinion.
Mr. First Selectman, I'm interested in your thoughts on this because I know the Board of Selectmen originally, this is what how my memory draws. I remember being at a Selectmen's meeting, I don't remember the exact month, last year when it was originally brought up for discussion, this adopting, this policy. And then the next step was after you guys had discussed on it and it seemed to be agreement in it, then the Board of Finance decided at the time to adopt it. So I'm curious as far as, with your knowledge and the discussion that happened in the Selectmen's, what do you think about the policy?
A lot of the points that were made tonight were some of the things we thought of originally, but I think we need to follow through. As Superintendent is mentioning, we're talking about allocations of money so far this year already. So if those monies end up going to where they were, as Dean was mentioning, we're down to a small amount of money. The bottom line would be, to Mr. Radin's point, rare occurrences, same as on the town side with the pandemic. We don't foresee it, but you never know what's going to happen. So what is our next step? I agree. I think we should get a legal opinion about where we go next, just so we're all on the same page. Not so much fighting against anybody, but really on the same page as to how the execution goes to eventually get to the point where it's no longer. So if you want me to do that, I can request it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as far as, so how much time do you think we should incorporate?
It probably would take us a few weeks to get a request in, a formal request, and then to see if we can get an answer. I could expedite it to see if we get it for your next meeting. That way it makes it a little.
Well, but what I'm saying is, I mean, to me, it probably at this point, it wouldn't make a difference if we tabled it probably till July. You know, we could shoot for like the regular July Board of Finance meeting, and I think by that point, we could definitely.
So you do know what our next line item transfer is going to be?
Mr. Chair, if I may address the superintendent. Superintendent DePietro, you mentioned that you had already reached out to attorneys. Would it be possible for you to provide what they sent to you for our as well?
Absolutely. I just didn't know where you were in your process. So, but
Yeah, if you don't mind.
no, you're welcome. Call them. The reason I did it was so that you can have the best information we could provide. By all means. By all means.
But I have copies of other towns on their policies, and they all, either town council has a right to close the account, as long as you have a public hearing to do that, basically. Just two towns here.
That's what they put in their policies.
Yeah.
I believe we viewed the same document.
Yeah.
I will wait for your request.
Yeah, so what I would be interested in entertaining a motion for right now is to table the decision for the Board of Education 2% savings fund to the regular Board of Finance meeting for July, pending the receiving of a legal opinion.
I'll second.
Okay, and Gary, any other discussion?
I think because there's state statutes involved, I think that's the wisest course of action right now.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next item D, review current fiscal year 2021 budget statement. Kelly, anything to note?
We got our last payment for education cost share, budget $14,990, we got $14,952, so we're short $37,000. Let's see what else I received recently. That's about it. I requested our municipal revenue sales tax revenue of $144,803. I haven't yet received it, but I should receive it shortly. You can still see that the building permits, they're over budget. Planning and zoning's over budget for revenue, and town clerk fees also. We have 2 more months to report in there, so you'll be seeing an increase in revenue still.
That extra 200 grand and other, that?
Actual other local revenue, 300,000 to 200,000. The bulk of that was at Connecticut Water when they had to rip up some of the roads, and they paid us money, and we repaired them ourselves. So that's the bulk of it. Was anything recently? Yeah, there was 2 or 3 of those, I think. Yeah, so that's the bulk of that money that you see. Property tax collection, we have, as of this report, we only have $219,000 left to collect.
The percentage on that is?
What was that balance?
$219,000 left to collect.
Okay. And that's at the 98%?
We're at 99% collection.
99. Back taxes, we collected more than anticipated. Let's see. Is any other questions about revenue?
There doesn't, Kelly, there isn't any kind of explanation or detail as to the lower than anticipated DCS grant that comes in, correct? I know, a year ago we had a similar discussion, I guess, just trying to game plan if there was a way we could try to anticipate this. I know the board of ed was part of that discussion at the meeting as well. So I'll let the chair's discretion, I'll expand the question to the superintendent and the finance director of the school and Mr. First Selectman if need be. If there's any kind of communication from the state about a change in that formula when the town receives their payments.
They spin the wheel, pretty much. I think a lot of towns were short, because I looked over the information that I received, there were a lot of towns that were short, but not by much.
Okay. Given the volume of federal dollars that we're anticipating over the next 2 or 3 years, how does the town receive those formally, and how are those going to be reflected, or if reflected at all, on our budget statements, financial statements?
Good question. I don't know yet. I had to go on the IRS website and draw down the funds. I haven't yet got confirmation. We're supposed to get a phone call or something. We haven't yet received that. So once I find that out, I'll tell you how I'm going to receive them. I think they're going to probably just wire it into our bank account.
Okay. Do we anticipate there being some kind of evolving guidance from the state on what we're allowed to do or offset?
Yeah, we already have that.
In addition to the...
You're talking about like the ESSER funds and the America Cares Act, all those?
Right.
Yes, we have guidance on those, and there's very specific guidelines as to what you can expend it on. We're already just discussing where we might be able to pull monies from for both sewer and broadband infrastructure, which won't happen. We'll look at the possibility of a revolving loan fund, as we used to have for our economic development, to help those businesses and people who were in need before. I think that's one of the things we're discussing. There's other areas that we're looking for to help and support for residents who had issues during COVID. But there's guidelines that tell you how to do exactly how to expend and where to expend it on.
I just think we need to be exceptionally vigilant about what's going to be permitted as a cost offset going forward. Given the potential to offset a fair number of costs, given the size of the dollars coming our way, but also to make sure that we're not penalized in the same manner if we carry the wrong action.
I think the first packet I got was maybe about 27 pages of how to follow this, and the second one was twice that. So there's still, every senator or every congressman will send you something about here's what's going on. But truly we're waiting for like the information from Martin Heft, who will give us all those guidelines and to share that with us.
Thank you.
Expenditures, you can see some of the expenditures that were over budget are part of our line item transfers. Like example, in the finance department, you can see overspent the audit, so that's one of the line item transfers. I don't know if any expenditures stick out that you have a question on specific.
Vehicle expense on the assessor. They don't spend any money for that?
Well,
Which item?
vehicle expense for the assessor.
They've
They
done very
don't,
well.
because it's a town vehicle and numerous departments share it, so whoever fills it up, they're the ones that get, charged the gas.
So the assessor can borrow that,
Yes.
somebody else fill it up, but that's...
Yeah, that is what happens. So, yes.
Okay.
I think most of these will be clearer at the next meeting, because once we do the line item transfers, you'll know what really is our next set of line item transfers at that point.
Yes.
Then on the economic development, we got the marketing deal. You didn't spend very much money on marketing?
Mary
Well,
Ann.
Mary Ann, but also with
Or is that all?
Jordan, because they're looking at things, how they're going to be able to work together, to be able to promote the town in different areas, whether it be online publications, whether it be actual publications. So we're still putting strategies together for that, so yes, you're right, we haven't done anything major with that as of yet.
Other than legal services, are there any potential draws on the contingency line in the last month and a half?
Not substantial. We do have some contracts which are finalizing, so there may be some from that. Once that does happen, I'm sure, I think by next month you'll see those transpire.
What's the status of the video cam for the town right now?
Great question. We just installed video cameras at the recreation center. And Mark has, do you have the new screen yet?
I do.
Excellent. So,
Is that part of what's in here now,
Yeah.
1,500?
yeah, and then the other thing is we're looking to get video cameras, we contracted an estimate with the same company for the town hall, but it's also going to aim out towards the track area. Because we have had problems with issues on the track, trying to make it as safe as possible, so that's also the first pass of that will come to us, we'll get the figures to see if we have to go out to bid or not. We're just trying to get an idea how much it's going to cost, but we should be able to get everything done with what's left.
The video screen for the police, what's that?
Probably not going to do that. You know,
Not gonna do that?
if you take a look in front of both the Warregan and the Moosa Fire stations,
Oh, yeah.
that's the type of video screen,
Ah, okay.
which is actually the perfect place to put it because it's centrally located on Route 12, and that's where the information would come about meetings, town meetings, things like that, or events that would be happening. We just don't think that's enough money in there this year, so that may be revisited, not in the coming budget, but the following. We'll see.
What's the status on surveillance at the police department? Has that been already addressed, or is that still the process?
In the process. That'll be one of the line item transfers at the end. We're actually going to have a meeting with the police chief and talk about multiple items. I was making my list of things that we'll be talking about. That's one of them, and one of the other line items within his budget as well. And just as a precursor to that, I can let you know that what I'm looking at is every week when we get I get the budget statement in, I do like you do. You look at those numbers and say, you know, how high is it? Is it good, or do we have extra money here? I can give you an example of what I look at and why. If you take a look at the registrar of voters, you'll see the numbers that are in the registrar of voters there, and we're looking at roughly 20,000 left over. We don't anticipate another town meeting or utilizing the polling places, so that those monies would be available. The intent that I would have with that type of money is to come back at the end of the year to make sure we can actually do things like the HVAC system that's in the 5-year capital for the
Town clerk.
town clerk. There's two of them there, one for upstairs, one for down. Well, we got that money left over, why not utilize that money now for the one-time purchase, so that way you're ahead of the game. Obviously, we're trying to do the best we can with looking at those numbers to see what's left, so we can utilize it properly. And then we will come back to you with actual numbers for line item transfer at the end of the year.
What about the ice rink?
That's still a possibility, because if you purchase it now, you don't have to worry about that later on.
Is it cheaper to buy those in the summer?
Yeah.
It's not cheaper to buy those in the summer, is it?
Actually, believe it or not, there's no season for that, but it's pretty much a stable price all the way through. I know Mark was starting to look at that for me to help me out with an estimate of what we're going to get for it. I had previously looked at some numbers, so we'll still continue. I know once we get the overlay for the basketball court, that's the intent of putting it up over there when it comes up.
All right, any other comments or questions on budget statement?
Yeah, I have a question for Kelly on page 6. On the pensions,
Yes,
now the total contribution is 1.2 million,
yes,
okay. And the 800,000 for the school pension, that's actually coming out of the town general fund?
yes. 600,000 is going to come out of the town's general fund, and 200,000 they contributed already
Okay.
from Board of Ed.
All right. But they possess like 65% of the budget, the overall town budget, right?
Yeah,
And we're funding 2/3 of their pension?
yeah,
Shouldn't it be the other way around?
I guess.
I mean, I'm just wondering.
It doesn't make sense.
You know, they have 2/3 of 75% of the budget allocated, but we're funding 75% of the pension. That doesn't seem very equitable.
Ken, I know you, of course, for many years now, I've seen, different during budget cycles, how the pension is gone being handled between town and Board of Ed. So on this note, though, it's a good question. Any thoughts?
Can you repeat the questions?
Total town budget is like $48 million. Okay. And out of that $48 million, the Board of Education gets about 75% $300,000. But the town's general fund is supporting it by 75%. Shouldn't it at least be the other way around?
So, not my place, but I did do an analysis of what's happening. And if you look at what's going on in the pension expenditures, you have a town, and it's about 27%. You have the police about 27% for about 55%. You have the school, which is 45%, and you have the sewer, which is about 3.5%. So when you look at the numbers, because the school seems like it's a big cost, the reality is there may be 450, but no one who's part-time is in the pension. The only full-time people, such as paras, they're making under $30,000 for the year, so their pension contribution and their pension drawdown is much less. These are the numbers we got. We received them actually today, and we went through it. So you can look at it, and if you look at the breakdown, if you look at out of $1.4 million being spent right now annually, $750,000 would be the town, approximately $650,000 would be the school, and about $100,000 would be the water department or the sewer department.
Okay.
And they are doing theirs, and we actually, if you look back to 2013-14, we transferred $350,000. I'd be happy to give you all the facts, but $350,000 for the town. We now added $300,000 into our budget for next year, which is a total of $650,000. We're actually meeting, but I don't think that it's wrong for the school to keep adding. I think what you need to do is look at the distribution of not how much the school budget is and the town budget is. You need to look at who goes into the pension and how much. Some people get the 2% per year increase. The paras may get 1.25%. You have to look at the range of the salaries that are being made at $30,000, because any teacher, any administrator is in the state's plan. So when you look at the real numbers, which we have, and we're trying to do an analysis, because the board asked us, we want to do our fair share or more. But right now, the money that has been switched is not accounting for money that was moved out, which is fine. That's not a problem. I just think you have to rethink how much money is really due from each section in order to be fairly represented. Plus, just one last point, after 2014, 2015, no employee either in the town or the school, definitely in the schools, now is in a pension. So that plan is going to have an accrual later.
So what you're saying is that your contributions should be about $650,000?
That's what it would be based on the right now, the share, actual numbers. We took all the amount of money that's being done. That has a variability as to how many people are going to live 20 years, how many people might be out 5 years. That's what actuarials do. I couldn't do that.
All right, so what you're saying is your contribution should be $650.
Yes.
Well, what is it?
Well, right now, you have a line that says $200,000 is coming from the fund balance.
Right.
And that we have $300,000 in for next year, which is $500,000. And I don't know what you want to do about the $300,000 that was taken off our side of the ledger and given to the town 4 years ago. If you don't want to count that, well, then we're at $500 and owe you another $150,000, and that's fine.
Yeah, but that $350, you said that was 3 years ago?
Yeah, they took it
But
off.
shouldn't it be contributions every year?
That's what we found is when I came here in 2010, for 3 years in a row, because the high school had a roof problem, they allowed the then superintendent to only put $100,000 in instead of $300,000. When I worked with Paul Sweet, and we looked at it back in 2013, 3 years later, I told him, you don't want that to ever be underfunded. We built it from $100,000 to $350,000, and then we said, let's move that money over. So the town went from $350,000 up to $750,000, and then it went to $1 million. But they took the money out of the school side and put it there so the money would always be put in, but not be controlled by the school anymore. It would be guaranteed that the town was putting that money. That's how they did it. Now, if that has no meaning, that's fine. Then the number that we now have is 300, and then next year we'd have to absorb the 200,000 from the fund balance. But in essence, when that's all done, you would have virtually taken 900,000 from the school side, which, I mean, that's just what I have as knowledge. I don't want to have this kind of discussion, but we're just trying to...
No, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, I know. So
and this seems like a good opportunity to ask the question. So.
Well, because, you know, for years it's like, are you paying a fair share? And it's hard to explain unless I've taken from 2014 to 2022 and show you how the money was done and what we did to protect the town. We made sure that the money could never be used by a school department saying, oh, we can't afford it this year, we put it on the town side. And then in 2014, we changed every single contract so that no one else goes into the pension, and that preserves that other people won't drain a fund that was short, and it's at about 84% right now funding, and you need to get that higher. So there is more that needs to come. I think there needs to be more on both sides of the town and the schools, but I just think you need to be fair to the town in terms of making sure that there's more money, and you have to tell the school that they have to add the money in and account for it. You just can't do that without raising taxes or something. There's no less programs you need for children. I don't argue that you need more money from us. I just think that you should be at 1.4 million, and your projection for next year is actually 1.1. So we added 100,000 more this year to our side of the ledger. Just we're trying to add more money so that the town has that extra funding. We try to support the town in every way. We work very well, and I think we've been supported by the selectmen, and we're trying to support them in every way we can.
Thank you. And Dean, that's a big discussion topic, I mean, every fiscal year, so I mean, it gets talked about, you know, quite a bit, especially after the audit too, because the audit, you know, tells us, of course, where we're at. And the hope, you know, based on, I know, feedback I got from members of the public on this current year budget was that there's many who said, you know, are we going to keep seeing an $800,000 line item, you know, in the budget, you know, coming from the fund balance? I said, no, you know, there is something, as was noted, that is coming from the fund balance being contributed to it, but that's going to be, I think, a work in progress, you know, certainly next year too, of figuring out. And that's basically what the auditor said, is it's up to the town leadership being representing the Board of Education, Christy Haskell, the chair, superintendent, Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance, basically us combined as the town leadership, need to make the decision and try to get on the same page and an agreement as far as how much should be coming to be put into it. So.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
All right, anything else on the budget statement? All right, moving on to last item, E, review for Board of Ed financial statement. Any questions or comments?
Just to confirm that we're still looking at an approximate 900,000 underrun for the
Yes,
end of the
sir.
year.
All right, any other comments or questions? If not, as always, you can reach out to Ken or Ron, you know, certainly if any questions come up after. So, all right, that being our last item, I now open the floor for citizens' participation.
Art Gagnon. I have some questions, comments on the computers. I've been watching this for a few years now. The computers are always over budget, usually. So I did some research. And my discoveries is last 6 years, they've been over budget five of those years. Okay. I don't know if you really need to know how much. You know, to my surprise, it really wasn't too bad over budget most years. Just 1920 went 98,000 over, which is huge. But I'm going through my different comments. The percentages that we use for computers that I asked at the department meeting at the central school, I did get an answer on that. We use 8% for software, 5% for hardware, and 83% goes to tech services. So, and that brings me to a question about our tech services protocol. And I would like to know about that because every year we spend between $25,000 and $100,000 on them. And this is not an item that goes out to bid. That's a question. Do we have an answer in that? I mean, is this go into procurement policy? Where this would be, or is it purchase services? Because I don't see it in purchase services. It's just a hidden thing that I happened to stumble upon because I was researching the computers.
So that would usually go through procurement?
Yeah.
So
Your board, yeah.
that's something the Board of Finance could look into, or whoever, Board of Selectmen, I don't know. And then another thing that occurred to me as I'm looking into this, the IT position is a supervisory position, and I'm wondering why. There's nobody under him.
That's a good question for the first selectman,
Yeah.
as it currently stands.
Yes, no, you
How
know,
many years ago was it that made into a supervisory position? 3, 4, maybe 5,
Yeah.
I think it was longer.
and maybe even longer.
Yeah.
I was curious myself and asked the same question as to why there's no one working underneath, but he's a supervisor. But now that he's in a certain union, you can't make him get out of that union. So that is, the eventual goal is when that person retires, is you're going to have to hire 2 different people because he holds 2 different titles. So I would like to look into the process by which we should be putting that out to bid. Now that we're streamlining everything, we see that every department has hardware and software, but then there's a technical support. Now that you see that, it would be probably a good idea then to look at putting that out to a bid process in the future so that we have a better price on and a better handle on it as well.
Yeah, so obviously that's not something that's going to be changing in the next year.
Nope.
But at whatever point down the road when it does change, I mean, I know feedback that I've received, I know Art has heard the same things as far as the website and other IT-related issues.
Yeah, I'm getting
I
to
guess my hope would be, actually, I know, we were talking about it the other day. My hope would be that whatever the future structure is going to be for that position, that whoever occupies it at a later time is dedicated to it, meaning that they're not, I'm not saying Kyle's a negative, I'm saying that he's got many other, things that he's involved in, and obviously that can affect how much time you can put towards certain things like IT, so. Many people have asked that, it's like, don't we have an IT guy? And the answer is, we do, but they gotta understand, and I've recommended, a lot of them go talk to him personally. He can explain to you and run through a day-to-day of what he does here, but from what I've heard from many taxpayers, they think it would make sense if we had somebody that is their role. Anything related to technology, whether it's setup, diagnosing, installing, all that, troubleshooting, and not really getting sent in any other direction.
so on that note, does the IT get trained at all? Because
Certifications.
no, he doesn't go through any trainings.
We'll go to a couple of classes during the year for smaller things, but not that I know of.
Okay. Because I think that would lower our protocol costs, our outside IT costs. So that was another thing.
Hey, Art, in your notes, you remember what year we appropriated a bunch of money to fix the computers in the town hall?
That would probably be this one, 1920. It was amended, it was 150,000 was the budget, and they amended it to 248,500.
And what year was it, over budget?
It was over budget all but 17, 18. Every year.
How much that year?
That year was 98.5
After
over.
we gave them the money.
Yeah. And most of that went to protocol, 102,400 to that IT that doesn't go out to bid. So, I know we pay Kyle 44,000 a year to do IT, and Rick Martell stated at that department head meeting that he doesn't do anything for him as far as assistant building inspector unless he's not around. So he should be doing mostly IT, I would assume. So, this is what gets me is the protocol costs, because they're up there. It's $2,160 per month, just on a normal basis, and then I guess extras. So, okay, so there's the issues. We started Zoom meetings, and we all know that you can't do 2 Zoom meetings in this town hall at the same time, because Kevin's tried it with planning, and it just cuts out. okay? And even if he's just the only one on it, he still freezes up every time he talks. So there's something wrong in the building. I know we got fiber optics last spring into the building. So here's another question, is that just to the servers and not to the computers yet? Do we need new lines? Kyle told me the jacks in the walls they're outdated. So maybe something we need to look into, the infrastructure. Hey, we got Amazon coming in, we got people coming into town, we need our computers working.
And Kevin, I know that we've talked about that as far as there's certain steps that need to be taken here in this building in order to get it updated, for
I was
technology.
told it's a work in progress. I know that we were talking to our internet provider about the line coming in, the dedicated line leading to the police, also a line for the town hall. We were just talking about that a little bit today because they sent us another request for a bill. And from what was $375 a month was now looking at more like $1,010 a month. And I wouldn't sign it because I wanted to know more detail as to why. If we're not getting the services, and there's supposedly a line that was here and dedicated, but they never put us on it, so we weren't even using it for almost 7 months. So there's a lot of things that I don't know of, but I'm getting the knowledge from, information from Kyle. But we need more support, more help.
Yeah, I mean, those are some good points, good questions, but I know we don't have necessarily answers tonight, but.
That's fine. I've been researching this for a while, so I just wanted to get it out. Okay, and Kevin brought up the cameras. We've had the cameras that they put the rec center since, July? I think we purchased those.
We just put them in.
We didn't put them in. We paid somebody to put them in.
Correct.
So that's more on IT that we're spending because our IT guy, I don't know if he's equipped to handle that. He needs training for it. Just ways we could save some money maybe. The time clocks,
Still work, well, they're working inside the building, and we have there'll be a June cutoff date where we're going to stop using the cards.
okay.
Once we start working through those details of what issues there are, we're going to move over to the next department, outside of here, and that'll probably be recreation. And then we'll go over to the next one after that, so make sure that everything works step by step.
Good. And then, like you were talking to me about the agendas. This has been, since I started videoing 3.5 years ago, I always on them because the agenda is not found, or the minutes, you can't. And now there's a new thing with the mobile app. June just noticed on hers too. You click on it, it just won't download. So these are things, these things need to be done. And if he needs training for that, he needs training for that because it's frustrating as a person, as a citizen, to have all these things just fail. You go on, like the Zoom meetings, and it fails. It's not good. It's not good for the town. The website updates. You mentioned that the pool is still closed until further notice. Same thing. This is IT, right? Should be doing this. So that brings me to hybrid meetings. Right? We want to do hybrid meetings. I don't think we can for a long time unless we provide some funding for it, because with the infrastructure we have, it's not going to happen. Not that I'm real keen on hybrid meetings because, how many people come to a meeting? Is it worth the money? But it's something we have to look for, in the future, I guess.
I can answer a little bit of that. The issue with the hybrid meetings is that there's still state statutes pending, waiting to come forward with bills that are going to require towns to be able to access either streaming and or hybrid. Once you do that, it's another cost onto the town, not just the equipment. You could have 3 cameras somewhere stapled and within the building to search, to go down onto the, not only the residents, but also the board. But now you're going to need the equipment. You microphones, because the boom microphone doesn't work, doesn't pick everything up. Secondly, you'd have to have, like I said, three static, or you'd have to have 3 people operating the cameras. Then you've got the switcher, you've got the converter. There's a lot of, and hardwiring. There's a lot of money. It's not just $1,000 to throw it in that's going to work as a streaming device because someone doesn't want to come to a meeting. But we will have some legislation in front of us that may make it so we have to have hybrid meetings. So we're trying to get ready for that.
That would probably apply, if I may, Mr. Chair, to all town meetings. So
Any
it's
meeting. Any meeting.
Any meeting.
Yep.
So that would mean that you either look at centralizing any and all meetings to one place, or multiple places have to be wired
Yes.
accordingly.
So my thought would be, all meetings would have to be here, right in front of us. Well, how do you do that on the second Monday of the month when you have three different groups who are meeting at the same time? I have to tell them they can't do that, they have to split it up. So that we have to have back-to-back meetings in some cases. But the bottom line is, you have to centralize it, or, like you said, have a secondary room to have it. All of this costs money, and you have to have it staffed. Someone has to run the board, or someone has to be at the camera.
Yeah, and that's what people in the public need to understand, is that, they shouldn't, asking if we're at that point of having that ability, yeah, I mean, they need to understand that we're nowhere near that, and it costs a lot of money. Maybe someday, we'll get to that point, but it requires obviously a lot more research and some careful decision-making. Like, as mentioned, it's like, with all the money that it would take to make us head, is it going to be worth it?
Right. I'm researching it now, I'm looking at what it's going to take to do it, but people do have to understand, just to say it on a Facebook social media page, oh, just put this up and it'll work. There has to be somebody at the other end of the camera, and you got to pay them eventually. So it's not easy, but it is doable, and it'll take a little time to do it.
So my last thing was just taking off what the police said they use for software. That was 71,000 is what they budgeted this year. 60,000 was going into hardware. But their software and their licensing averaged 60,000 less protocol for the last 6 years. I'm just going to read them off. What we had available for hardware for the town, not police, but for the town, for hardware or extra software we needed, is 46,000, 15, 16, nothing, zero is 16, 17. 17, 18 was 62,000, 18, 19, 41, that was an amended year. They asked for more. 19, 20 was 86,000, that was the year you asked, when we got the extra computers or whatever. Last year was 30K plus the 15K you just did in line item transfer, so that's 45,000. So for this coming budget year, because you can really tell because the police took their own, we have roughly $60,000 available for hardware and extra software. It's not much different than the other years. So I can't see any of our problems going away anytime soon, unless we do something. And we have a budget this year is what? With the police, 220,000. That's up from last year, 125,000. So we got extra $100,000 this year, but it's just police. They're getting the extra 60,000 because they're getting computers. So the town side's getting nothing. We're not going to upgrade anything this year on 60,000. Just something to keep in mind if you want to move us forward into the 21st century, which is why I'm doing all this research, because I'd like to see us move forward. Not look like, whatever. Amazon comes in, they can't have a meeting with the first selectman because it cuts out or something, That's all. That's my sole interest.
Okay, thank you, Ron. John?
My question is, how many employees do we have that do multiple jobs? You expect on one person tonight who does, say, two jobs. How many employees in this town do multiple jobs? Do we have an answer?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
First selectman.
Well,
And how are we billing their time or accounting
before
for
you
their
want
time for
to,
those
I
jobs?
can answer, I'll try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kelly does books for both town and also the books for the WPCA
And HR
and HR. Yeah, HR has multiple.
and insurance,
Yep.
like all that.
Yeah, so you have multiple. I can't think of anybody else that has two jobs,
How about Sarah? She cleans here.
but she's under the one title of cleaning at both.
Okay, for all buildings?
Yep.
But do we account for her time when she's at different buildings?
Yes,
So we can account for how many hours she's spending in particular
Yes.
buildings? So we know where the money's getting spent.
yes.
So your question is, you're looking for an actual number of how
Well, there
many?
should be some sort of account. How many people are actually doing multiple jobs to become a full-time employee? Because you could have somebody doing two jobs to
two part-time jobs to be full-time, which seems to be a common occurrence here. And how are we accounting for their time to those particular roles? Are we making them clock in and out when they leave
Yeah, yes.
the police department?
Yeah.
So she's up there cleaning the police
There's no
department, she
clock-
clocks in when she
there's a-
gets there, and when she clocks out when she's leaving?
She,
Yeah, she writes it down.
She writes it
does.
down.
You have a count for that, yeah.
Okay.
We could tell you, yeah, on her time card, she does do that.
But I think there's multiple people that have multiple positions, correct?
just the ones we mentioned so far.
Zoning enforcement, how many jobs does he do?
He's a assistant town planner, but he does zoning enforcement. It has it within his job title, but it also has it in his job description of what he does.
And does that break it down to where he is when he's there? I mean,
I don't understand how you would be able to do that. It's not like you're working in a factory where you're doing one section here, you go over to another area and you're punching in over there. Or you're writing in your time of what you're doing for building this, and then writing in your time for paperwork for that. It's not like that.
What should it be?
In this particular case, I don't think you can.
Just fulfill his responsibilities.
So Sean, are you interested in like knowing more about the job descriptions of?
I was just more interested in how many people are actually doing multiple jobs, because it seems like there's quite a few that take care of more things than just one.
Okay.
And how are we accounting for their time? I mean, we could be a billing, we'll go back to the computer programmer, or the IT guy, we could be accounting he could be spending this whole time over there and not in the other department, but we're billing this department also. So how are we accounting for this stuff? To make sure that he's spending the time where he should be, and that one department's not getting shorted. It should be accounted for. Just like when the cleaners are at the rec center, or at the highway garage, or wherever they might go, it should be accounted to that particular building, so we know how much time they're spending in those buildings.
But we do that with this particular cleaner. She goes to both here and also to the,
But you have lawnmower, you have guys that mow the grass.
he's an outdoor maintenance person.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
how many
also,
places
So
do you take
how would you
care
like to categorize everything that he does?
of? I don't know, I'm just asking.
I don't think there's a way to do that. And half of that would be coming back and putting on your timesheet, taking more time away from the duties you'd be doing
Takes
by
5
writing
minutes.
down. That's fine.
Takes 5 minutes to account for where you're at. That's how you create accountability.
I think that one position we've been talking about has two totally separate functions. Absolutely totally separate functions.
I just think that we gotta make sure we build the right departments in general, and I think certain departments aren't getting billed.
Now, does he punch in for each individual one?
No,
He's getting paid for both at the same time?
correct.
And just for the record, I wasn't picking on anybody having two jobs.
Well, that's what it came off as.
So
I
Sean,
wasn't.
are you looking for some follow-up on that?
I don't think I'll get any, so it doesn't matter.
Is there anything else to your comment?
I guess there's nothing at this point.
Okay. Any other citizens' participation? No, then I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned 8:14.